Okay, so it says, so it's sort of like, so it counted, distinct, created by. Okay, so it actually went into the list itself. I am not an SQL expert. I don't really write all the SQL queries. And I think if I have to, I would very easily switch to an ORM. And if that's you, I think you're gonna love this feature of GitHub Copilot, which is available for free in VS Code. So this is another live stream for the to-dos application, and what the application does, it stores all the to-dos, the collaborative lists and tasks in a Postgres database. And while in the application, I use an ORM, SQLize, to translate between the database layer and the TypeScript layer, the Express or the server layer, the APIs. On the database side, the data is still it's still stored in the database itself. So you have to use SQL queries to extract all the information. Of course, that's possible and very easy to do, especially for the simpler ones. But if you have to combine multiple tables, multiple records to see, okay, which user is performing what action, or how many users performed a specific, or for example, a very simple query that I will run in this stream as well is how many users created a new list in the last 7 days. Now that's simple enough query, but if you don't really know SQL, because I'm not a very proficient person in SQL itself, that kind of that query can be very easily translated into a server call that gets translated into a SQL query for you and can be executed on the database. I will share a point where this whole operation can become very sensitive, and that is when you give this agent access to your database and it has all the rights. For example, it has the right permissions to perform destructive queries as well, which means that it can purge the database, it can remove the records, because that's one of the biggest problem that a lot of engineers are facing right now on the internet, where an agent actually goes and drops all the records, truncates everything in a table, and there is no backup. What I tend to do is, for these kind of scenarios, I only grant or provide the connection strings that only have read-only access. So in this case, what I actually want to go ahead and show you is, I think one of the most interesting feature that I have seen is about where you just sort of like send a message, how many users are there in the database. So once you ask it that message, it simply goes ahead and provides you with the information. So if you see here, so this is actually part of the Copilot free usage as well. So my allowance is going to reset tomorrow, so I was like, okay, might as well just go ahead and use it. So what it does, it just goes ahead and sort of like fetches all the tables context, which is like how many tables are there in the database, and also how to fetch the user count. So for example, it says select count as count static as user count from to-dos, and then it provides the result. So as you can see here, the user count is 5. Definitely this is my local instance of the database. I'm never gonna run this on production, but it easily shows, okay, how many users are there, and I can even go further and drill down, like, okay, how many users have their email addresses verified. So now based on this conversation, it's gonna do another query where it's gonna go ahead and ask, like, okay, what does email addresses verified mean in this context? What column can I read on? And then generate a query, and then it's gonna execute that. And then I think next onwards, I will go ahead and sort of like add some complex constructs to it, like, okay, how many new users joined in the last 7 days, or how many users actually created lists in the last 7 days, things like that. Oh, and while it's doing that, one of the challenge that I've seen this face is it doesn't really have the same amount of memory like the LLMs or copilots have. So it doesn't really remember a lot of context that went. If you see here, so there's like a session that's going on. If you want, you can keep these sessions stored, or you can always create a new session and sort of like start fresh. So now if you see here, it has picked up this column email verified, which is set to true. So it's like, okay, count all the users where email verified is equal to true, and then it sort of like knows, okay, 2 users have their email addresses verified. So instead of all the 5 users, it's only 2 users who have their email addresses verified, not all of them. What I really love about this is like it also knows like how to join the columns. So for example, how many users created a new list in the last 7 days. So let's see, because one thing to note is so far it's only counting the values. It's not sort of like showing the data, it's just counting. So it's using the count operator function to just sort of like provide a number, like this many people actually did it. So that's actually really very interesting use case for Copilot for me. Okay, so it says, so it sort of like, so it counted, distinct, created by. Okay, so it actually went into the list itself, and then from the lists it sort of like found the unique list items. So for example, user A, user B, user C. So if let's say user A created 5 lists, it sort of like grouped them all together. So then there's only one list, because we only asked it to count how many users created lists. We didn't ask it how many lists were created. So that's, I'll give it a point for that. And then it's like, okay, where created by is not null and created at is greater than now, or the minus interval is 7 days. So that's like, okay, it goes back like in the last 7 days what actually happened. So it's like 0 users were created, because of course this is a staging database, local database, which gets reset. So if it were to run on the staging environment, it might have some data, and of course on the production it definitely has data, because a lot of users are creating lists, and there's definitely a projection there. Now one thing that I wanted to share earlier was, like, for example, since this is just let me ask it, how many lists are in the database? So let's see, if I ask it how many lists are there, it can easily show like all the lists that are created in the database. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask it to remove an instance of a list. Again, this is a local development environment, so I can definitely go ahead and remove the data. But on staging environments, use the keys that don't have access for the write operations. So anything that needs update queries, etc., do not grant those. But for this case, I wanted to demonstrate how this conversation can actually lead to you losing data. It doesn't make much sense for you to allow it to have the right access. So let's say if I ask it, can you delete, actually let me ask it to softly delete the lists created in the last 7 days. But then I think it said that there were no lists created in the last 7 days. If you see here, like, I'm already exhausting. Yeah, this is another big challenge for me. I think it's like you just send like 100 messages and then that's it, like 150 chat messages, and then your allowance for the entire month is gone. Like, now I cannot use it unless I pay for it, right? So yeah, now it says, like, for example, update. And an interesting thing is it sort of like understood that instead of executing a drop or delete query, I need to use the update query and set deleted at to now. So that was really really nice. And I think I also really like this extra check where I can execute statement soft delete lists last 7 days, and then it executes that. Of course, in a production or staging environment, if this were to be executed, it would fail. It would say that I don't have rights if it goes ahead and tries to execute that statement. And that should be the only practice on non-local or non-dev environments. So result, the reason it resulted in 0 is because we previously saw that there were no records. There were no lists created in the last 7 days. So yeah, lastly, I think I really love this feature of Copilot or Gen AI is I tend to use Gen AI in places where the task is very mundane for me. I don't really enjoy writing the script. Like for example, I don't enjoy writing scripts in this manner. I would rather write it in a language. For example, I would rather write this in TypeScript or JavaScript or I don't know, C#. C# is my favorite, but then in other languages as well. I would rather prefer to write it there instead of SQL. And then again, SQL language itself is different for Postgres, SQL Server, MySQL, etc. So I don't enjoy writing SQL, and I think that is where Copilot really helps me out. So that instead of me focusing on how much data was created, what is the structure of a table, or how to join different tables and get a result, what I can do is I can just perform an operation and then ask the Copilot to provide me with the results, and then it can show me what's really happening. And I think one of the best ways to use this would be translate this into a notebook. So for example, if you have a Python Jupyter notebook or Kotlin notebooks, you can translate this into a notebook. I know Visual Studio Code also has the notebooks feature. So that would also be a very interesting thing to do. Like if you just sort of like have a Copilot build an entire notebook for you, which you then, instead of asking it to, create and generate these scripts over and over again, you just have one notebook and you just start it every day. And then the notebook updates every, 1 hour, 3 hour, or whenever you open it up. So I think in my opinion, that's the best way to use it. And then again, the programming part, the coding part is still with you, the things that you enjoy. And another reason why I prefer it this way is because if I do it like this, like for example, if I ask it to do mundane tasks, then I can do the tasks that I don't feel are mundane, or the tasks that I don't think are boring, like for example, writing code or writing script. And I think that's one of the biggest challenge that a lot of people are facing, is that they feel challenged by these Copilots. Like, oh, Copilot is going to write my Python scripts, but I prefer to write my Python script, or I can write better Python script. Well, then don't ask it to write Python script. Ask it to, do your logos, do your design. But if you're a designer, then ask it to, do your SEO. And if you're an SEO person, maybe ask it to do an MVP. And I think if you start to think about it in that essence, then it doesn't become a competitor for you. It becomes a partner for you. And this is one of the examples where I use Copilot in a way that it's my partner and not my competitor. And with that, I think I'm out. Maybe I will, next, maybe what I can do is I can show how to use Copilot to do a notebook generation, because I know Visual Studio Code also has support for that, but I'm also exploring the Kotlin notebooks by JetBrains. So we'll see which one comes next. And thank you for watching this one. I'll catch you in the next one.